So today, I'm going to give you an overview of our 2016 outlook and the 4 trends that we've identified for 2016, and then we're going to take a deep dive into one of them. And we'll have events later in the year for the other 3 trends, and we actually have copies of the outlook here for you to take with you, printed copies, and the website is also up and will be updated later today with some video overviews for all of those trends. So we've got all of your trends for you, and we're going to take a deep dive into one of them. So as part of the outlook, we like to identify one big story, one takeaway that sort of encompasses all of the trends and that can be a useful strategy for coping with these changes. And this year, that story is brands as a service. And we think that in 2016, we really need to, for our brands to thrive, we really need to connect with consumers and provide them value at every touch point, regardless of if that's actually part of our organic product or service. So in 2016, really, every brand needs to find a way to become some kind of a lifestyle brand. And that's our big takeaway, and we'll talk about that a little later. But right now, I want to dive into the trends for 2016. So the first one is appified TV. And we know that consumer behavior has been shifting slowly for a while, and we think this is accelerating. The how and when and where we watch video content is changing pretty quickly. And the distinction between what we watch in our living rooms on our televisions and what we watch on our phones and tablets and computers, that distinction is really, really blurring. And this brings with it a bunch of challenges, but also a lot of benefits. We're getting a lot of the benefits of digital, which is really coming to television, which is still, obviously a huge mass market concern. Next is boundless retail. So the line between online and offline retail is also blurring. We're seeing big e-commerce companies like Amazon starting to open brick and mortar stores. And at the same time, we're seeing brick and mortar retailers start to use mobile CRM tools to actually be able to track consumers through the entire purchase funnel, the same way that we do online. And at the same time, even the line between when I'm shopping and when I'm not as a consumer is blurring when we have things like appliances that can start to reorder their own supplies automatically without me actually having to do anything. So we're really always shopping, and the distinction between online and offline retail is really blurring. And ad avoidance. So last year, ad blockers made a lot of headlines, and this is a question we get asked to talk about a lot. We like to think of it in the bigger picture as not just ad blockers, but there are options for consumers to avoid advertising across pretty much every media type, including audio and video, as well as text on the web. And so how do we reach these consumers who are increasingly not seeing anything that look like traditional advertising? We need to develop new strategies and tactics to actually reach these consumers. And our final trend for 2016 is conversational interfaces, and this is our topic for today. Conversational interfaces refer to devices and products and services that can speak to us using natural language, whether that's through voice or through text. So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into conversational interfaces. The idea of things that could talk back to us has been around for a long time. Does anybody remember this? This is, if you were at our last presentation, you know that I like to take a big historical look at why these trends are important. This is Smarter Child. This was a bot, a chat bot that existed on AOL Instant Messenger back in 2000. And it wasn't actually that smart. All it was really doing was identifying the parts of speech from dictionary words and then repeating them back to you in some predefined templates. But it was engaging enough that there were millions of people who had conversations with it. And interestingly, I did some research. The company that behind Smarter Child eventually went on to make a lot of those voice-activated phone trees that we all love so much, and eventually was bought by Microsoft and then shut down in 2007. So the idea of things that talk back to us has been around for a while, but when we think of conversational interfaces in the modern era, you can really trace it back to the introduction of Siri on the iPhone in 2011. And regardless of what you think about Siri now or thought about Siri then, it obviously is the beginning of a new trend in technology, as pretty much every major technology company has jumped into the conversational interface in the past few years. So we have Google introducing Google Now with OK Google in 2012. Microsoft with Cortana in 2014, Amazon with Alexa and the Echo also in 2014, and last year SoundHound with their Houndify platform that lets any developer embed this sort of functionality into their app last year in 2015. So when you look at these together, they're what we might call virtual personal assistants. And this is not the entire realm of conversational interfaces, but it is where all of the big boys are playing. And virtual personal assistants basically try to take on the tasks that you might ask a human to do for you and automate them in some way. So I'm sure you all are familiar with Siri or Google now at this point. But this is one specific kind of conversational interface. And the way that it works is it turns your speech into text. It sends that text up to a server where there's some artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence tries to make sense of your rambling sentence, and it then spits back out text, which is then sometimes spoken back to you, sometimes it's displayed on the screen, sometimes it triggers other actions like turning on your lights or starting your car, things like that. If you look at this process, though, there's actually one step in this that is not strictly required for this to work, and that is speech. Because it turns out humans actually text with each other and communicate using text as well. And so if you think back to the previous slide, there was one major tech company that actually wasn't on there, and that is Facebook. And Facebook last year launched M, which is their entry into the virtual personal assistant realm. And M communicates to you via text only. And there are some advantages to this because, as we know, when you're speaking to another human, whether that's in person or over the phone, you expect a reply pretty quickly. But when you're texting with them, it's okay for there to be a little bit of a delay. And Facebook has really used this to their advantage. One thing you can do when a delay is okay is route that message in different ways. So a really interesting thing about M is that it is sometimes responds to you using artificial intelligence, and sometimes it routes that request to a human. If the artificial intelligence doesn't know how to handle it, it sends that request to a human. So unlike Siri or Google Now, if you ask M a question, you get a response. You don't get a funny joke because it doesn't know what to do. And it might take a second, but you always get a response. And this enables M to do crazy things like lower your cable bill, which is what happened when a Verge writer actually asked M to lower his cable bill from Comcast, gave M the account number and all the other information, and someone, a human sitting on the M team, actually called and got his cable bill lowered, which is kind of amazing. So, this routing really enables it to do all kinds of crazy new things. Because of this, obviously this is not scalable in the same way. You couldn't roll this out to everybody with an iPhone or an Android phone today. So M is actually in private beta only in San Francisco right now. But over time, Facebook is going to build in a lot of the human questions, the questions that are getting routed to humans. The more common ones will get built into the AI, and over time the AI will be able to handle more and more of these things. So we're pretty interested in M and to see how that develops. So those virtual personal assistants are one realm, but you don't have to necessarily tackle the entire quantity of human knowledge to participate with conversational interfaces. Facebook actually also has another horse in the game, which is Messenger for Business. And this lets businesses actually message consumers on a one-to-one basis. It enables some of the same tools to route through artificial intelligence or to humans. And actually, one of the partners that we work with, MSG.ai, who is here today, they actually provide a platform that provides this routing on Messenger as well as other text-based platforms. So you can hook it up, program it with AI answers to some of the most common questions, or to handle things like, where is my package? Okay, send me your order number. Okay, here's your FedEx tracking number. Here's where your package is. That can all be automated, whereas more complicated questions get routed to a human. And Facebook is actually pretty invested in taking over the call center for customer service. So we think Messenger for Business is actually going to be a pretty big trend going forward. And because who wants to sit on hold for waiting for someone in a call center? If you can do this via text message, it's much more convenient for everybody. When you're waiting, you just put your phone in your pocket. You don't have to sit on hold or something like that. So where else might this be useful? This kind of routing between humans and AI, and these sort of automated chatbots. Another place is Slack. Does anybody else here use Slack? We use it at the lab. Are there any other teams that are using Slack? Okay, great. Awesome. So Slack is corporate communications. It's like group chat for your office. And from the beginning, Slack has had sort of automated bots built into it. There was Slackbot, which could always you could set reminders. You could set reminders for yourself or for your colleagues. But there's all kinds of new opportunities because of their developer platform. So Slack actually, there are new Slack bots that will do things like run your meetings for you, where if you just have a normal check-in every morning or once a week or whatever with your team, it will send out a message to all team members, wait for everybody to respond with what their status is, and then send out sort of the collated list of what everybody's working on. And it sort of lets you have a meeting without actually having to stop what you're doing and have a meeting, which is pretty cool. And the Slack platform actually integrates all kinds of other things. There's Foursquare and Yelp integration. There's seamless integration. There's Uber integration. There's lots of interesting things happening where you can just sort of type to something in a format that you're already typing to, and make something happen in the real world. On top of that, there's a ton of startups that are actually in this space that are working in the sort of text-based conversational interface realm. So one of them, x.ai, who's here on the right, they're actually here with us today. They have a virtual assistant that helps you schedule meetings. You just copy her on your emails when you're trying to set up a meeting with someone, and all of those back and forth emails of when you're available, when you're not available, all those things that are annoying because you can't actually see each other's calendars, x.ai actually handles all of that to schedule the meeting for you. You don't have to see it. You just eventually get the meeting request from x.ai. There's Pana, which is a virtual travel agent. And actually, you just tell Pana where you need to go and when you need to go, and Pana picks the best flight for you. And you just hit one button, and you book it right in the app. There's Lark, which does something similar for health and fitness. So if you are tracking what you're eating, rather than search through a database like MyFitnessPal and have to figure out, well, which is the best match for this random thing that I made myself on the weekend or this random restaurant I went to, you just type a general description of what you've eaten, and it figures out how many calories are in that and how much you need to be working out. And then lastly, there is Stefan's Head, which is actually, doesn't even have an app, it's actually just SMS-based, and it's an SMS-based e-commerce platform. So about once a week, you get a text from Stefan, and he sends you a link to a web page, but rather than actually purchasing anything on the page, you just text him back if you want something. And he remembers things like what size t-shirt you wear, and he remembers things like your credit card. So you don't have to you don't have to actually enter all of that information in any time. You don't have to log in ever. It's all just done through this one-to-one communication channel over SMS. And Stefan's Head particularly has a great personality and is pretty funny. And they've done a lot of brand promotions, actually. So it's something to look at from that perspective. So that's sort of a big overview of what's happening in the space. Now let's talk about specifically what this means for brands. Well, for one thing, we think that this is probably the interface of the future. Much in the same way that kids today think that screens that you can't touch are broken, we think that in the future, kids are going to think that things are broken that they can't talk to or that they can't text to, that any device or service that you can't talk to is broken. And why is that? Well, that is because of the explosion of connected devices in the world. So as we move from the smartphone to everything that has a battery or electric power eventually being connected to the network over the next couple of decades, a lot of those things don't have screens. So we have to be able to communicate with them somehow. And voice and text is a pretty good way to communicate with those things. And that's going to be an order of magnitude larger. So at some point, we will have a smartphone for every person on the planet, so about 8 billion smartphones. Eventually, there will be hundreds of billions of connected devices. And a lot of them we're going to talk to. So one implication of this is that it really changes search and discovery. So now we search on Google, we get a page with 10 blue links. That goes out the window when we're searching for things with voice or text. Most of these are actually using the AI to power recommendations, so you really only get one result. And that result is a combination of whatever the artificial intelligence is thinks, for globally, for the group, combined with what it knows about you. But that presents a lot of interesting challenges for brands, because if I am always buying one particular brand of cat food, for example, how does a challenger brand break into that? Because Alexa actually is always going to assume that I want the exact same brand of cat food. So we have to figure out how to convince consumers to request us by name. That is one strategy to do that. Obviously, there's also will be opportunities for paid placements, especially you can imagine for Amazon and Facebook are looking at paid placements as part of their conversational interfaces. And that's not a part of the market right now, but we can imagine that that's going to be part of it in the future. And another thing is really about finding your brand voice. I know this sounds trite because we've been talking about brand voice forever, but it has to get very specific when you have to not only tell an artificial intelligence how to speak for your brand, but also all of your customer service reps are no longer, Cindy in customer service. They are speaking as your brand, and your brand will have one voice, whether it's powered by an artificial intelligence or coming from actual humans. This is an example of a MSG.ai integration, actually, that did with the Goosebumps movie, which saw tremendous success. And it actually let you chat with the villain from the movie. And he would do things like send you GIFs and movie trailers and stuff. But they saw, I think it was something like 20 million engagements over the course of this campaign. So super successful, and a case that we like to feature. And lastly, you need to partner to handle these integrations. These are things that no brand is really able to do natively at this point. As I mentioned, Slack has an open developer ecosystem. So does Alexa, which is in the Echo, but also at CES they announced that Alexa is actually coming to Ford cars in 2016. So we actually pitch, at the lab, we pitch Alexa and Slack integrations to our clients all the time. If you guys are interested in this, please come talk to us. We love talking about this stuff. We would love to help you figure out what the right kinds of integrations might be for your clients. And then outside of that, there's obviously the Houndify platform from SoundHound, which lets you integrate this kind of virtual personal assistant directly into your app. If your clients have apps already with an install base already and are interested in integrating some of this, Houndify might be the right platform for them. And MSG.ai, as I said, can provide this sort of text-based conversational interface across platforms. So with that said, we have 3 guests with us today, and I'd like to bring them out now. We have Michael DiNuzzo from SoundHound, Alex Poon from x.ai, and Puneet Mehta from MSG.ai. Hey guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi guys.
How you doing?
So let's start out with a big question, which is why now? Why do you guys think, I mentioned obviously this has been a thing that's been brewing for a while. Why are conversational interfaces sort of blowing up right now?
Yeah, I think when you look at this space right now, the interest level is certainly through the roof. I can just recall a few weeks ago, it was like a Thursday night primetime NFL broadcast, and I saw an advertisement for Siri, I saw one for Amazon, and I saw one for Google Now, all within the same telecast. So I think the interest level is through the roof, and looking back to your question, if you look at like consumer behaviors and needs right now, they're very focused on demand. How products and services are evaluated about how effectively they can connect audiences to what they're actively seeking. How fast can they get them what they want? And if there's a quicker way to get from point A to point B for your consumer, that's certainly going to be of interest. At the same time, I think like with what's currently existed in the marketplace, there have been some limitations. There's certainly, this year is going to be a big year for us as we look to introduce our products and technologies. A lot of the, say Google and Apple specifically, they do speech to text, text to media. Okay, what our platform does, either our consumer-facing app, Hound, which is going to go live next month, and then the developer platform you mentioned, Houndify, is it does natural language processing and voice recognition simultaneously. So it's one engine or interface, so to speak, that is doing this all at once. Just like you hear me talking to you right now, you're processing what I'm saying and you're hearing my voice at the same time. Our ability to do that results in much faster results, much more accuracy, and the ability to have a much more natural dialogue with devices.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interest has always been there, that which is mostly gated by technology limitation. Like we've gone from websites, nicer looking websites, apps. Those are in a way this crutch of what's the best way we can do based on technology limitation and how we can interact with a machine. I think with all the advancement in data, in the amount of data that we have, ability to process a lot of data, the ability to actually capture all these new types of data sources with smartphones, Fitbit, and so on and so forth, that allow us to now kind of all those technology come together to allow us to kind of catch up to the demand that we have always had.
Yeah, in our opinion, it has to do with consumer habits. You look at the smartphone, and there's only one thing we see. Messaging is the top habit on the smartphone. There are 3 billion people on the top 4 messaging apps. 3 billion with a B. That's bigger than all social networks put together. That's bigger than the audience that Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Pinterest have put together on the social network side. Now think about the focus that brands have on social networks and compare that to what they're doing on messaging. That's the opportunity. So that's why today is the time, and early mover brands, like you saw what Goosebumps did, that's a $100 million movie, the level of engagement was through the roof. Why? Because consumers want it. Consumers don't care what brands want, they want what they want, and they want messaging. So that's why the time for conversational interfaces is now.
Yeah, so do you think this is going to be the primary way that we're interacting with products and services going forward?
I think conversations is one aspect, and conversations are great because of what we call explicit intent. Like think of the internet word and we had search, right? Search box is a place where you go and type in what you need. It's explicit intent. But the good thing with the smartphone is that it has a bunch of sensors, so it can figure out where you are. It can remember this is home. It can know that it's raining outside. And that constitutes what we call implicit intent. So we think that the interfaces of the future would have a conversation aspect to it, which would be primary, but they would take into account this implicit intent. So it's the best of both worlds. Kind of what Google now does in the background, married with you can just message anything you want.
To me, the migration path feels more like, before we all have desktops and most of our work are performed on desktops. And then we have apps or iPads and so on that we can perform a lot of the work and the entertainment on those devices. But there will be special cases where you still want, if you're doing, Excel or video editing, you still end up sitting on a laptop or on a desktop with big screens. So I think that a lot of these tasks that are easy to do and makes a lot more sense to do with the conversation, it will be done on conversations. For certain things that if you want to see visualizations, like for example, let's say I'm calling a car from Uber, right? I think like that right now they have integrations with Facebook that I see the messaging, but sometimes I think you still want to see the map and see where the car is, right? And that there's no better interface to show you the map except actually looking at the map. So I think the maps will stay.
Yeah, I think just one quick point to make on that. Like when we started, our thesis was that for infrequently used services, messaging is the best interface. So if I use Uber every day, I'll take the pain to download their app. I'll take the pain to, as a consumer, I'll take the pain to develop a habit to learn their app, right? But if I'm dealing with a brand that I talk to only 2 times a month or sometimes once in 6 months, how can a brand be really great at developing a digital habit? That's not their core strength. Their core strength is selling their product and service. So they should ride on an existing habit. So yeah, long story short, for frequently used services, apps are still a good interface, but for infrequently used services, the category where most brands fall in, that's where messaging would be a big winner.
Yeah, and to address your question, Adam, I think the answer is simply yes, in that, again, going back to my earlier point, if there's a way, like if you're looking at consumer behaviors and there's a way to get them what they're looking for in a more efficient, natural way, they should leverage that. I mean, just look at examples where you've had communication breakdown with a significant other over text messaging, or you could have gotten from point A to point B much more effectively if you picked up the phone and talked to someone rather than sending highly detailed, long, lengthy email to someone. So if there's a way for us to talk to technology that same way, conversational, natural, then it's definitely going to lean more towards that avenue.
Yeah, I think we definitely agree, Puneet, with that assessment that the sort of lightweight things that you only need occasionally, but putting them in a messenger type interface, whether that's voice or text, it's just removing that app install barrier makes them a lot more accessible. So how do we've seen some brand engagements, like the Goosebump thing is a really great example. How do you guys think that the sort of platform for brands, how do you think that's going to evolve? Are we all going to be like text messaging the Coca-Cola bears all the time? Or where do you see brands fitting into this equation?
Well, I think brands certainly have a lot to say and share with their audiences, right? So I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. But like say for us, for example, we're trying to leverage our search assistant app Hound, which is going to go live next month, and create more innovative ways for brands to speak to their audience. So with us, like you had mentioned before, if you look at search marketing right now, it's typically a bunch of blue links loading on a page. We want to create an ownership opportunity for a brand to live there and have a dialogue with the audience. How do they do that? We're still working through that and having that discussion with media brands right now. But just say, for example, someone within your Coca-Cola's target audience is looking for a pizza joint nearby. We have the ability now, contextual targeting has existed for some time. We can target based on natural language, phrasing, the way someone actually speaks. So if it's a kid saying pizza joint rather than pizza place, whatever, we can hit them with media based on that. And then to take that further, we can leverage our technology through the Houndify platform and build it into an ad unit for Coca-Cola where it can prompt the user to have a dialogue with it based on what it's looking to share, whether that be content, whether that be contests, sweepstakes, offers. There's a lot of different opportunities depending on what the strategy and objectives are for that brand.
Yeah, so when I was looking at the list of trends, I saw two more, which was one was boundless retail, and the second was ad avoidance.
Yeah.
And I think the ability to message a brand is not just because the consumers want that. I think they also contribute to those two. So obviously, a consumer doesn't want to talk to a brand if the brand is talking at them. But one-on-one, it results in something like Goosebumps. 4 organic posts, no media behind it. 800 hours of conversation. Like, when did we see that last? And people open up and share their most personal details, including the name of their kids, and asking Slappy to, come with them to their chemo appointment or watch the movie with them. So it gets that personal. So that's the thing where, ad avoidance that's the reason that people are not engaging with these ads, is because they're not personal, they're not one-to-one, and people are not getting out of it. And boundless retail is another thing where we're working with some of the largest CPG brands in the world, and they want to engage with the customers one-on-one now. They don't want to rely on the retailer to talk about their product in a less qualified way than they should. As an example, the largest shampoo manufacturer in the world, you can guess who they are. They're sitting on years of research in their Europe data center that matches shampoo with the right hair type and weather conditions. And the data tells them that 30% of the people end up using the wrong shampoo. Now, what kind of user interface should they use to get to these consumers? It has to be something like messaging. So we think the trend is bigger than just limiting it at the interface level. We think it's contributing to retail, it's contributing to ad avoidance, and the holistic picture there.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think that the one-to-one sort of private nature of these conversations with brands is actually really changes the dynamic. One reason why we are super bullish on messaging services for customer service is that it changes even how consumers talk to brands, even when they're upset about things. Obviously, we know complaining on Twitter has become a sort of de rigueur way for consumers to sort of get attention from brands. But once you take that into a one-to-one communication, people just speak differently to the brands because they speak to them like they're speaking to an individual person rather than just some faceless entity, which really changes the whole conversation and really lets brands sort of be more effective in the way that they deal with customer service, for sure. Back to sort of, I guess, the interface layer, and this might be a little political given all of your platforms, but do you guys have feelings on when text or voice input is sort of the right way to communicate? with these conversational interfaces, obviously some of you have preferences, but from the lab's perspective, they're pretty equivalent from user input. It's just what is sort of right in the moment and what's the easiest way for consumers to get that message out. But do you guys have thoughts on that?
So, for x.ai, we chose to communicate with you. It allows you to schedule meetings over emails. We get asked all the time, like why aren't you on some of the newer platform and so on. But the question, the way we think about it is, we're not trying to build something just fun and trying to capture what's new, but more on how are people actually using it. What medium do people use to schedule meetings today? And for us, we look at it as most people still schedule meetings over emails. Now, if things move and we go to different platforms where primary business is conducted in other ways, other channels, then we will move to those channels. But right now, that's where consumers want to go, or where our customers want to go.
Are you guys, maybe this is something you can't talk about, but are you guys looking at Slack at all? Considering that's another.
We looked at all channels. I think the way we think about it is that they're different. The channels itself are very different than the AI that are making determinations and the language understanding. It's much more about, okay, where are we getting the data, and then how are we going to process them? They're kind of two different entities.
Yeah, I think it's basically case by case, depending on what the person's looking for. And I think typing and swiping is certainly not going anywhere, but it really depends on what's the most effective way, I guess, to get to where you're looking to go. And I mean, for us, we're having conversations, across a number of different verticals. So if it's with a personal or credit card organization or personal finance, that's much more sensitive information where you may not be as likely to walk down the street and talk into a device about it. So they seem to be more centered on the text service approach, which our technology has capabilities, but voice is really what we're focused on. So whereas if you're a drive-through service at a QSR organization, they're looking to eliminate keyboards, eliminate human interaction, sadly, in some cases, where the voice technology, I think, will play a more prominent role.
Yeah. The way we look at this is, it's essentially a formula for us, which says, don't change the consumer habit. So I think, as an example, what x.ai is doing is great because people are already using email to schedule meetings. So don't change that habit, otherwise it'll be too big a hurdle to cross. With brand to consumer interaction, consumers are already using messaging, right? 3 billion people on these messaging apps. They go back there sometimes 50 times a day to message with their friends. And if a brand says, I want to become a friend, where should they go? They should go where they're talking to their friends. And if Facebook allows that with Messenger for business, that's an amazing opportunity. And then I think if we dig down one layer deeper, we look at, what kind of services do brands want to provide? And mostly it would be three things. One is they want to get serendipitously discovered, which is the top of the funnel, right? More marketing related use cases. Second is decision support. So if I'm in an aisle about to buy a shampoo with CPG products, if I'm about to make a decision on a product or a service, then decision support, and this happens before the transaction happens, right? So it's traditionally marketing part of the funnel, but it's where you have these qualified people who have expressed intent that they want to engage with the brand, and they're very, very valuable. And today they get lost with traditional channels. And then it is, post-sale support. So you build a longer-term relationship with the brand, and these consumers become amplifiers, right? And they feed back into the top of the funnel. So it's kind of how it goes through the funnel. But again, long story short, ride on an existing habit for brands. That's messaging is where it is.
Great. I think this something that might be helpful for some of the folks here, just in thinking about how to take this back to our clients. Can you talk a little bit about what the scripting process is like? Like if we're going to do a brand execution, whether it be through voice or text, what is that process of actually scripting for artificial intelligences and or for humans? How do you manage that? What are the kinds of people that you bring in? Are they normal copywriters? Are they more like script writers? Like what is that like?
So in our case, as an example, Slappy was trained for about a week and a half. One book that I recommend that has nothing to do with AI is Don't Shoot the Dog. It talks to you about how to train a pet. So it's essentially reinforced learning, and that's kind of how AI learns. So what we have done is we have simplified the process for marketers, and we give them what we call cartridges, and then somebody who does copy or creative is essentially able to load these cartridges with content and kind of stitch them together, and then our system creates something like Slappy. So they're completely, the interface is really simple to use, and the reports are really simple to use. So you start, you can A/B test, you can do all of that, but you don't have to know AI to do any of that. And like I said, Sony Pictures spent about a week and a half training Slappy, and then there were a couple of hundred people that actually talked to Slappy. So Slappy was learning on the job before it went live on Messenger. And then once that was done, Slappy was up and running on Messenger. And so far, it was the highest engaged campaign on Facebook Messenger anywhere in the world, period.
Yeah, the comparison I would draw, again, would be like you have WordPress, you have Drupal that you can build kind of like website very quickly. And then you have other websites that you customize for, then you have internal team that actually build the website and optimize it and so on and so forth. So I think the job category of an AI interaction designer, I think will grow dramatically over the next 5-10 years, just because of then you will have areas where you can just kind of plug and play and not have to think too much about the interactions. And for x.ai, we think deeply about how that interaction is going to be like. We're crafting this character. The voice, we want the voice to be centralized, so that when Amy or Andrew is speaking to you or writing to you, all the interactions are standardized, that it feels like it's the same person who wrote, is writing to you, just like you'd be dealing with a person, instead of having one engineer wrote a template here and then another engineer wrote another template there. So with that, we did not hire a copywriter. We end up homegrowing our own person from our team who deeply understands how a really good executive assistant will interact, and then kind of tying in the detail and very, very tightly integrate that person into the engineering team and the data science team who are actually building the experience. Because to us, it's both a experience challenge as well as a data science challenge.
Yeah. Just quickly adding on to that. So in our case as well, and I would encourage you to talk to Slappy. There's a private instance we created for all of you guys. You would see that Slappy has a real personality. He's nasty. Like you watch the movie, and Slappy is nasty. Like kids have nightmares about Slappy. So you would see that. Like as an example, I have it on my phone. I'll show it to you after we're done with this. But there was one time when I said hi, and Slappy says, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I said hi again. It says, "Hey, I thought we got past that," and it sends me 2 emojis. So that's the thing. The personality aspect is really important. Has to gel really well with the brand. So the goal for us is, the reason we have spent years building this AI platform is so that for a marketer, it's really easy to add in the personality, the content, the copy, the creative, and then you don't have to go really out of the way to be an AI interface designer. Our system kind of does that for you, and you feed in what you normally would be doing.
So for us, we're looking really to sort of take ourselves out of the equation with the platform that we've developed, where it's open. To give you a little bit more insight into it, so the Houndify platform, it has nearly 150 domains that currently exist in it. Domains being travel, local search, weather, nutrition, finance, information like that. All through this platform, it's all open, so you can go in there. We want to share this technology and access it yourself. Go in there. If a domain exists, say it's weather, just for example, you want to start a weather app and voice enable it. You can go in right now without having to speak to anyone within the organization and develop your weather app and power it through voice through that existing domain. So there's a lot that brands can do right now, and then we're having many conversations on the side, some of which IPG that we look forward to, the Media Lab, but we're going to have a platform that's going to exist hopefully around Q2, early Q3, to build custom domains. So if something doesn't exist there and we don't have all that data and information, the brand can still go into that platform, Houndify, and start building a custom domain associated with it. So again, we're trying to share the technology and sort of take ourselves out of the equation, give full control to the brands, but of course be there as a resource if needed.
Yes, that's a good jumping off point. So Michael, you guys kind of are becoming your own platform provider in a lot of ways, but is there anything that you all of you are looking for from the big platform providers, from Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, in terms of integration points. Right now, out of the big ones, Facebook and Amazon are the only ones that really allow platform integration. Apple and Google obviously are sort of the elephants in the room when it comes to integrating with their platforms. What are you guys looking for, maybe hoping for from those platform providers in the next year or so?
Yeah, well, I think there's definitely working synergies between us where they could leverage some things that we do well and we can leverage things that they do well. But like for us, Google and Apple are very important to our business model in that they operate the primary app stores, right? So they're going to be key for distribution of the consumer-facing app, Hound, when it goes live next month. And there's over 1 million, I believe it's over 1 million now apps available in the App Store. And lobbying for exposure and placement within that is certainly very political, but that's going to be detrimental, really, as long with other marketing efforts for the organization to get people excited and people aware of what we're trying to bring to the marketplace.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
For x.ai, we are on email, so we're not on any other platforms. And as a startup, we certainly prefer not to be on anyone's platform if we can help it, just because of the dependency and the login and so on and so forth. I'm certainly very interested to see how app stores like Alexa will play out, just because of I think it's a very different experience on if I have to download or have to authorize 20, 30 apps, and how do I find those apps when I'm just talking to an interface? How do I see them? It's the current, the Apple or the Android App Store experience already tough to kind of find apps that you really suit to. I think that challenge would be even more so in a conversation UI that you don't see anything. How do you know which one you want? I mean, sometimes you really, and how do you discover new ones? So I think it'll be a very, very different space.
Yeah, we agree. We definitely see discovery as a big challenge with Alexa, even though there's dozens of new skills added every week. Just remembering which ones you've enabled alone is just sort of challenging.
Yeah. So for us, we support the top platforms. We support Facebook Messenger for business. We support Twitter direct messaging. We support Kik if you have a teenage audience. WhatsApp is about to launch, so we've been working with them. WhatsApp for Business is about to become available. We support iMessage on the smartphone, and then we support Slack. So those are the 6 that we are focused on.
Great. I'm going to open it up for some questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions?
So, kind of in the beginning, you mentioned this helping with companies that outsource customer service requests to phone calls and you're waiting. And immediately, I thought of flights and how much trouble I've had in the past with that sort of thing. Have you seen any brands that have started kind of moving into this?
I mean, as far as airlines go?
Yeah, or just travel.
Yeah, so Pana, there's a startup called Pana that is focused on travel, and they are a sort of concierge, travel agent that handles via text, and they do bookings, and they also will sort of help you reschedule things if you miss your flight or your flight is delayed. It is backed by a combination of AI and humans, so there will be humans on the other side if you really do need help with something like that. I think Pana is the only one that I know of in the travel space, really, but they're pretty interesting. They have a personal service, but also an enterprise level service. So they're actually fighting to compete with Concur for travel bookings for enterprise right now. Unfortunately, we can't use them, but I would check out Pana. It's a great question,
Yeah,
too.
so I'm having these same conversations right now. Again, if we go back to personal finance and banking, very secure, sensitive information. So, and I'm also talking about how our platform is open for people to access information. I'm not sure what the correct engineering term is for this again, but there's an option to close it, right? So it's locked and it's not open. So not every organization that we work with is going to want their information living in the cloud and available to other people to access, obviously. In those instances, there's security in place to ensure that it's locked away from anyone else accessing it. So if you're American Express, it's the same as you're typing and putting your information into the app. If you're speaking it, you're still talking to the same, you're still going through the same security parameters that you would in any other situation.
Yeah, so there are two models to consider there. The first one is the concierge model, where you give your information to, let's say, Facebook M, and Facebook M does something on your behalf, right? Or a travel concierge or a healthcare concierge, whatever it is. Second model, and over there, you have to be able to trust this service, right? There's no other option. The second model is where a brand engages with you directly, which is using Facebook Messenger for business. So remember the days when Facebook came out and Facebook had brand pages. So every brand came in and built a Facebook fan page. So similarly, now every brand wants to build a Messenger ID so that people can message with them. And that Messenger ID is owned by the brand. So you're talking to the brand directly. So there is no third party. And the brand is using a combination of AI and humans. So it's either their community managers or support people. So these guys are really working for the brand. You're not talking to a third party there. So we work only with the second model, where we want every brand to have a messaging ID on Twitter DM, on Facebook Messenger, on Kik, on WhatsApp, so people can message them. And then the brand team, along with AI, addresses all of that.
Yeah, I think if you think about it, like you feel okay giving Comcast your account number when you call the phone number that's on Comcast's website. At some point, you will be able to message Comcast directly and give them your account number through Messenger. And there is going to be a little bit of not a learning curve, but a trust curve where people are going to have to get comfortable with that. But I think it's the same way that your bank says, don't just call the phone number that's in this random email because it could be a phishing email, like go to our website, call that number, and that's like the official number to call us at. I think it'll be something similar around just establishing trust on these platforms. And yeah, there might be some things that some people will never want to give a third party to their virtual personal assistant, whether it's M or Siri or Google or whoever. But that one-to-one direct relationship, there will be a trust learning curve there for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about today's world, when you use an app from a brand or you use the website from a brand, you go there and you log in. What is an app? An app is a bot, right? It's a piece of technology. So similarly, this conversation thing is just a bot. And in many cases, what brands are doing is they're having a logged in experience and a logged out experience. So for the decision part of the funnel, the marketing pieces, mostly which concerns this room, they might have a logged out experience. For customer support, you might not have to give them your ID. They might give you a screen and you type in your user ID password and then they have all your information. Yeah.
Just one or two more questions.
What are the biggest challenges in selling AI services to brands? Like, what are brands most concerned about?
So, in most cases, what we have noticed is that a brand should focus on what would be a 10x experience for the consumer. And sometimes they have some difficulty really adding value via digital experience to a consumer's life. And that's the reason when brands built all these apps, nobody downloaded them because they didn't really add daily value. Now the good thing is that you don't have to add daily value. You can be there and you can add periodic value, right? Even if it's once in 2 months, it's okay because I message some friends once in 2 months and that protocol is fine. So the two big challenges we have seen, number one is them figuring out what are those most valuable customer touch points. Some of them have not thought on those lines. They've just been doing blind media buy, mostly a spray and pray approach. And this is about organic conversations that result in a real transaction. So it's not about filling in hundreds of million people at the top of the funnel and then selling to only 1% of those. It's about filling the funnel with 1/10 of that and selling to still 5 times. So the outcome is much higher, and most brands are still kind of learning that. The second thing we have figured out is how they look at AI. Some of them think, oh, this is AI, it's going to take a long time to train. Would it talk with my brand voice? And the proof is in the pudding, right? With Sony Pictures, they tried it for a $100 million movie. So All it took them was a couple of weeks. And then they said, yeah, we don't need a community manager on this particular instance. Let it run on its own. So I think it's those two things, is figuring out what the best 10x is for the consumer, and then knowing and understanding that the tech is finally there. We're in 2016, not in 2010.
Just building on that a little bit more, like with AI and voice, the most hot button when you're having this conversation with brands, it's critical that it works, like that it's consistent and that the user experience is adding value to what they're doing. I mean, if you're going to change your business model to be powered by natural language and voice technology, it has to work nearly 100% of the time for them, because you can't afford to, lose your valuable consumer based on a poor experience. And because I think the experiences, for lack of better words, may have been a little bit clunky in the past and haven't been as positive as I think they will be as early as this year, they're a little bit skeptical, I think, to dive in full force. But for us, we really feel like a successful brand integration is one that blows their mind and changes the way that they used to do things in the past. They're no longer doing it that way. They're doing it this way. Rather than opening up an app, typing in a destination, hitting another button, and to get your car service to the airport, hit one button and say, I need a car right now to JFK Airport at this address. Done.
Yeah, and then one last thing to add to that is some of the brands are not yet realizing how big of an opportunity this is, because you remember the early days of the App Store. You could just create and publish an app, and you'll just get 10,000 downloads a day organically. You didn't have to compete with a million other apps, right? So now we are in those days within messaging interfaces where any brand that comes on board, would just get organic traffic free, right? That's why 4 organic posts on Facebook, 800 hours of conversation, like unheard of, right? So and that window of opportunity is probably the next 6 months. So some brands that we're working with, they get it in 15 minutes, they move on it, they benefit from it. There are others that kind of get in their own way, and so it's the window of opportunity is not too large.
I think that's a great place to end. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for coming, and we will see you in March for Appified TV. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.